Hey man, let's talk about something that most men feel but don't quite know how to explain. It's that moment when a woman looks at you like you're the perfect man, even though you know deep down she barely knows you. It's that honeymoon phase where she romanticizes everything, even your flaws. She builds this mental castle out of butterflies, poetic texts, dreamy glances, and she installs you as the king before you've even earned it. And for a moment, it feels like heaven. You think, maybe she really sees me. But what she actually sees is what her mind wants to see. Not the real you, not the facts, but the fantasy. That's the world she lives in. An emotional, imaginative world she constructs from feelings, not reality. And brother, this isn't just about love. It's about how her entire worldview is shaped. Most women don't process information the way we do. While a man tends to filter the world through logic, structure, and consequence, a woman filters the world through emotion, sensation, and imagination. It's why she can go from feeling adored to feeling abandoned within a single afternoon, not because you changed, but because her emotional weather changed. And instead of anchoring herself in facts, she constructs a new story to fit how she feels. That's the key. Her emotional state becomes her truth. If she feels lonely, you're distant. If she feels insecure, you're cold. If she feels bored, the relationship is dying. None of it has to be objectively true. It just has to feel true to her. And here's where it gets dangerous for men like you. Because when you try to operate in logic while she's operating in fantasy, you're not speaking the same language. You're using facts, timelines, reality. She's using vibes, feelings, and the stories in her head. So when you say, "But I texted you back in 5 minutes," and she still says, "I felt ignored," you start questioning yourself. You wonder if maybe you're wrong, maybe you did neglect her somehow. But that's the trap. Because now you've stepped into her world, where facts don't matter unless they validate how she already feels. And the moment you abandon your truth for hers, you lose your frame, you lose your leadership, and worst of all, you lose yourself. You ever notice how she can build you up like a superhero and then tear you down like a villain? That shift isn't about you, it's about her internal story changing. In the beginning, her mind created a version of you that fit her dream, her ideal man, her fantasy. She ignored red flags. She amplified green ones. She filled in your silence with meaning, and every good moment confirmed her imagined version of who you were. But the second you failed to match that image, whether by being too quiet, too busy, too normal, she felt disillusioned. And instead of adjusting the fantasy to fit the man, she adjusted her opinion to protect the fantasy. Suddenly you became distant, selfish, changed not because you actually did, but because her imagined version of you started breaking and she couldn't handle that dot. This is why men get blindsided. One day she's all over you. The next day she's cold. One moment she says you're everything she ever wanted. The next she says she's not sure about the connection, and you're left scratching your head, wondering what did I do wrong? But you didn't do anything. The story just changed in her head. And that story isn't based on who you actually are. It's based on how she feels. And when a woman's world is built on a fantasy, the second reality creeps in imperfection, boredom, effort, commitment. It threatens her entire narrative. And instead of facing the truth, she rebrands the fantasy. She turns you into the villain of her own emotional screenplay. And the credits roll before you even realize what happened. The most dangerous place a man can live is in a woman's fantasy because it always comes with an expiration date. You were never hired to be yourself. You were cast as a character in her story. And as long as you played your part, saying the right things, acting mysterious, feeding her emotional high, you stayed in the script. But the moment you became real, with flaws, needs, boundaries, she started rewriting. And in that rewrite, you weren't the romantic hero anymore. You were the man who changed. But the truth, you didn't change. You just stopped being her imagination, and she couldn't reconcile that. So instead of updating the fantasy, she left. Or worse, she stayed and made you suffer for not being who she wanted to see. And here's the psychological twist. She believes it. She doesn't think she's living in a fantasy. She truly believes she's being honest, self-aware, grounded. But the female mind has a powerful ability to overlay emotion onto memory, to rewrite experiences, to reframe facts. It's how she can tell her friends you were distant even though you saw her 3 times that week. It's how she can cry about feeling unloved even though you were the one carrying the relationship. She isn't lying, she's reinterpreting. And that reinterpretation isn't about truth, it's about emotional survival. Her mind creates what she wants to see because what she needs to feel is more important than what's actually real. So what do you do as a man who sees through it? Do you yell, argue, throw evidence in her face? No, that's the biggest mistake men make, thinking you can logic your way through illusion. You can't debate a fantasy. You can't fix a story you didn't create. What you do is detach, not from her, but from the need to be understood inside her world. You lead from reality, you stay anchored in truth, you show up consistently, you set boundaries. And if she's able to step out of her illusion and meet you there, you've got something rare. But if not, you don't chase, you don't beg. You let her go live in the story she needs while you live in the truth you've built. The hardest part is realizing that you were never the man she loved. She loved the idea of you, the way you made her feel, the potential she saw, the image she crafted. But that image wasn't sustainable. It was emotional smoke. And when the wind of reality blew through schedules, disagreements, real life hurt, illusion faded. And because she built her attachment on fantasy, she had no emotional tools to deal with reality. So she ran, or accused, or shut down. And you were left with the emotional bill for a dream she created and you never consented. This is why men must build emotional discernment. You can't afford to fall in love with how a woman looks at you. You must fall in love with how she behaves when the fantasy breaks. How she reacts when you're not perfect, when life gets hard, when you disagree. Because the women who confuse love with imagination will disappear. The second reality enters the room. But the rare woman, the grounded, self-aware, emotionally mature woman, she won't run from reality. She'll build with you through it. And until you meet her, protect your peace, guard your energy, and never let a woman's fantasy define your worth. Let's talk about how deep this goes, because it's not just romantic. It's in how she sees herself, her friendships, her enemies, her future. Everything is filtered through how she feels in the moment. That's why her goals shift every few weeks. One day she's all about love. Next she's chasing independence. One moment she wants marriage. The next she's posting quotes about finding herself. None of it is fake. None of it is calculated. It's just that her identity is built on emotion, not structure. And when emotion is the foundation, the entire house sways with the wind. You try to build with her, and suddenly the blueprint changes because she no longer feels like building. And there you are, left standing with bricks in your hand and no walls to place them on. And here's the tragedy. You try to love her through it. You think, maybe if I'm more understanding, she'll find clarity. So you stay calm during her storms. You validate her emotions. You give her space. You try to be the stable rock in her shifting sea. But what you don't realize is this. You're loving a projection. You're loving someone who's not really there. She's emotionally elsewhere, either reliving her past or fantasizing about a future she's not present with you. And no matter how grounded you are, you can't anchor someone who keeps jumping ships. And eventually your strength turns into exhaustion, not because love is hard, but because loving someone who doesn't live in reality is draining. You want to know why some women are never satisfied, why they always seem restless, unsatisfied even in good relationships. It's because no man, not even the most masculine, successful, emotionally intelligent man, can compete with a fantasy. You can't outperform her imagination. You can't outdo the perfect guy in her head who never forgets a word she says, who texts her exactly when she wants, who gives her butterflies on command. That man isn't real. He's constructed, he's tailored by her feelings, and no real man can live up to that fiction. So when you show up with depth, strength, flaws, boundaries, she feels disappointed. Not because you're lacking, but because you remind her that perfection doesn't exist. And some women would rather chase ghosts than face that truth. This is why women get bored in healthy relationships. Not because they want chaos, but because they've equated stability with dullness. They're used to emotional spikes, drama, guessing games, highs and lows. That's the emotional diet they've been fed. So when a man brings peace instead of panic, presence instead of performance, they mislabel it. They say things like I don't feel the spark, or we've lost the magic. But what they're really saying is, this feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels wrong. They're not used to reality. They're addicted to stimulation. And if you're not careful, they'll confuse your calmness with coldness and go running back to the roller coaster they swore they were done with. You'll know you're dealing with a woman trapped in her imagination when nothing you do is enough. You'll buy her flowers and she asks why they weren't roses. You'll plan a date and she'll wonder why it wasn't more spontaneous. You'll express your feelings and she'll say, you didn't say it the right way. That's not love, that's projection. She's trying to mold you into an idea, not connect with your reality. And the more you try to meet her standards, the more those standards move, because they're not rooted in appreciation, they're rooted in fantasy. She doesn't want you, she wants the man she thinks you should be. And trying to become that man will destroy you. Here's what most men don't understand. When a woman is emotionally immature, she confuses disappointment with betrayal. If you fail to live up to the version of you in her head, she doesn't just feel let down, she feels hurt. And that hurt turns into blame, into anger, into detachment. You didn't lie, you didn't cheat, you didn't change, but you failed to maintain her illusion, and for her, that's enough to feel betrayed. She doesn't process the difference between expectation and reality. All she knows is that something feels wrong now, so you must be the cause. And the heartbreak for you is realizing you're being punished for not being the imaginary man she never communicated existed. This is why emotional boundaries are so important. You don't just protect yourself from betrayal, you protect yourself from delusion. You make it clear from day one, I'm not here to play a role, I'm here to build something real. And if you can't see me, the real me, without trying to edit, mold, or recreate me in your mind, then this won't work. Because a man who lives in reality should never try to build a future with a woman who lives in a fantasy. That's a recipe for resentment. And the moment you stop entertaining her illusion, you regain your dignity. Not by yelling, not by chasing, but by walking away with your clarity intact. Asterisk, you want to know what's scarier than being left being misunderstood while staying? When a woman creates a story about you in her head, one that paints you as cold, selfish, distant, no amount of love can fix it. She'll rewrite every good memory to match the new narrative. She'll ignore your efforts, distort your intentions, and convince herself that you're the problem. And if you stick around trying to prove otherwise, you'll only validate her story. She'll say, see, he's trying so hard because he knows he messed up. And suddenly even your kindness becomes evidence against you. That's how twisted it gets. And the only way out, let her believe what she wants, and exit the storyline. Some men get stuck in the cycle of fixing her worldview. They think if they just explain things better, or love her harder, or become more romantic, she'll snap out of it. But that's not how this works, because the imaginary world she lives in is emotionally safer than reality. It protects her from responsibility. It gives her control. It lets her be the victim, the princess, the goddess, without doing the hard work of being a real woman in a real relationship. And the longer you play along, the longer you delay your own healing. The only way to win is to walk away from the game entirely. So remember this, women who live in fantasies don't want truth, they want validation. They want to feel right, not be right. They want a man who fits into their narrative, not one who builds his own. And if you're not careful, you'll abandon your truth trying to fit into a story that was never yours to begin with. You'll become an actor in her emotional screenplay, and when the plot changes, so will your value. That's why grounded men don't compete with fantasy. They offer reality, and they let the woman decide if she's ready to live in it or not. Because a man who lives in truth never fears being misunderstood. He only fears wasting his soul on someone who never truly saw him. The most dangerous part of all this is how silently it happens. She doesn't tell you she's rewriting the story. She doesn't announce, hey, just so you know, you're no longer the hero in my emotional narrative. No, she just starts pulling back, getting distant, questioning things. And if you confront her, she'll say, I don't know, it just feels different. That's the key phrase, feels different, not is different. And that shift is often based on absolutely nothing real, just a vibe, a fleeting discomfort, or some made-up storyline she imagined. While lying awake at 2 a.m., you're still the same man, but in her eyes, you've changed. Not because you actually did, but because she reinterpreted you to match a new feeling she couldn't explain. And that's the part that makes it so infuriating, because you're not fighting lies, you're fighting subjective emotions that wear the mask of truth. She doesn't think she's being unfair. She's convinced she's finally seeing clearly, but what she's really doing is cherry-picking moments, spinning them into meaning, and using them to reinforce a story she created to justify a feeling. That's how women emotionally survive uncomfortable truths. They reframe them. So instead of admitting she's scared of commitment, she decides you're too emotionally unavailable. Instead of facing her own boredom, she decides you've changed. It's not a conscious plan, it's instinct. It's emotional self-protection disguised as clarity. And if you try to argue with it, you just look guilty. This is why emotional detachment is not cold, it's survival. You cannot get sucked into every new narrative she builds. You cannot spend your days trying to prove yourself in a world where the rules change every time her mood does. That's not a relationship, that's emotional tyranny. The more grounded you are, the more insane it will make her feel, because her fantasy thrives on movement, on emotional turbulence. But you're rooted. And when a woman can't drag you into her storm, she either calms down or she leaves. And either way you win. Because a man who stays in truth never loses what matters, he only loses what was never real to begin with. Some women even create imaginary threats. You'll see this when she accuses you of intentions you never had, of energies you never gave. Off she might say, you don't care anymore, even though you've done nothing different. Or you were looking at her even when you weren't. These are projections, fear disguised as intuition. She feels like something is wrong, so her brain manufactures a reason. And now you're on the defense for something you didn't even do. Try to defend yourself with facts, with logic, with clarity. But none of it lands because the real battle isn't between you and her. It's between her fantasy and her fear. And you're just collateral damage. And what makes it worse is that some men internalize this confusion. They start believing it. They think, maybe I am too cold. Maybe I don't care enough. Maybe I need to be more like the guy in her head. And slowly they abandon themselves. They walk away from their standards, their values, their peace, just to try and become the man she imagines she wants. But that man doesn't exist. He's a ghost, a projection, a patchwork of emotions and stories from her past. And when you try to become him, you don't become more loved, you become less respected. Because women don't trust men who chase their fantasies. They trust men who stay rooted in truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. There's a reason the rarest relationships are the most boring to outsiders. They don't have drama, they don't have constant highs and lows. They have clarity. Two people grounded in reality who don't need to constantly reinvent each other to stay engaged. And that's why they last. Because they're not built on fantasy, they're built on mutual understanding. But to get there, you have to let go of the dream that you can ever be enough for a woman lost in imagination. You have to realize that your value is not determined by how well you match her movie script. It's defined by how deeply you embody your truth, regardless of whether she recognizes it or not. You'll notice something powerful happens when you stop performing for her illusion. Her confusion increases at first. She'll be more reactive. She'll test you harder. She'll try to provoke emotions from you because the fantasy needs your participation to survive. It feeds on your validation. But when you don't react, when you remain calm, when you keep showing up as the same man regardless of her moods, she either breaks free from the illusion or walks away from you. And if she walks away, you didn't lose something real. You lost a woman who couldn't love outside her imagination. And if she wakes up, then maybe, just maybe, she's ready for something real. You want to be truly powerful. Be the man who sees through the story and refuses to play a part in it. You don't get caught up in what she says when she's emotional. You don't bend to her every change of heart. You simply watch, observe, and move with intention. You don't try to change her mind. You don't beg her to understand you. You live so truthfully, so consistently, that her fantasy starts to look silly by comparison. That's when you become magnetic. Not because you're a master manipulator, but because you're the rare man who's immune to emotional fiction. Her mind will always create what it wants to see. That's not evil. That's not wrong. That's how she was wired. Women are emotional visionaries. They feel their way into meaning. They connect dots that aren't there. They imagine outcomes before they exist. It's beautiful when it's used to create art, beauty, intuition. But in relationships, it can become a weapon, especially when it's unexamined. So you as a man have to be twice as rooted, twice as clear, because your job isn't to enter her imaginary world. It's to build a real one she can choose to step into. And if she never does, let her go. Let her live in her stories. Let her chase the fireworks, the fairy tales, the perfect man who exists only in filters and fiction. You're not here to compete with fantasies. You're here to live with honor, to build with integrity, to lead with truth. And when the world tries to convince you to become more emotional, more chaotic, more reactive, stand firm, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. And in a world full of fantasy-driven women, clarity is the most dangerous trait a man can have, because it doesn't just reveal them, it reveals you. There's a point where you stop trying to explain reality and just be it. You stop trying to make her see your worth and you simply live in a way that reflects it. Because a woman who's addicted to the imaginary will always find fault in the real. She always poke holes in the consistency, looking for chaos to match her internal storm. And when she can't find it, she'll manufacture it. She'll say you're too calm, too distant, too unaffected. But what she really means is, you're not playing the emotional game I'm used to, and you shouldn't. Because the moment you play, you lose your center, you lose your edge. and a man without edge gets cut by every blade of emotion she throws. You'll notice over time that the women who do respect you are the ones who battled their own fantasies. They've chased illusions, been burned, and finally woke up to the cost of delusion. Those women, they don't need a movie scene, they need peace. They crave truth, and when they meet a man who offers that, not through speeches but through action, they hold on quietly, gratefully, because they know how rare it is. So don't lose yourself trying to fit into the emotional theater of women who haven't reached that point. Let them perform, let them dramatize, but you stay in the quiet power of reality. You see, women don't fantasize because they're evil. They do it because fantasy offers control in a world where they often feel uncertain. Emotional stories become their compass. Even if they're wrong, they feel right, and feeling right gives them power. But when they meet a man who isn't shaken by those stories, who doesn't contort himself to fit their emotional whims, that power disappears, and they're left with two choices: evolve or exit. And that's the filter you use. Not manipulation, not pickup tactics, just reality. Let her choose whether she can meet you in it. And if she can't, you lose nothing. Because here's what you've learned: you don't fall for projections anymore. You don't fall for potential. You don't get attached to who she could be. If only you evaluate what's now, what's real, what she chooses to be when the fantasy fades. And when a woman realizes you can't be swayed by seduction or guilt or emotional fog, she either levels up or vanishes. But what she doesn't do is control you. Not anymore. Because the man you are now isn't moved by illusions. He sees the world and the women in it for what they are, not what they claim to be. There's a quiet kind of power in being misunderstood and not explaining yourself, in knowing a woman has made up a version of you in her head and letting her live with it while you move forward. That's the power of detachment. That's what makes her spiral. Not because you're punishing her, but because you're no longer participating in the lie. She'll say, "You've changed," and you have. You've stopped playing along. You've stopped feeding the emotional machine, and now that she can't use her feelings to dictate your behavior, she either has to face herself or run. Either way, you're free. You don't fix women who live in fantasies. You don't become their therapist, their savior, or their mirror. You become the standard. You walk in truth consistently. You communicate clearly, you lead with values, and you let them either rise to meet you or reveal who they really are. There is no chase, no proving, no trying to fit into the ideal they crafted from rom-coms and trauma. You're not that man. You're a real man. And real men don't perform. They show up, they stay steady, and they walk away when their peace is at risk. If there's one thing you hold on to, let it be this: clarity is the antidote to chaos. Your groundedness, your unshakable sense of who you are, that's your shield. That's how you survive the games, the projections, the confusion. Because when her world starts spinning, she'll look at you to see if it's real. And when you don't spin with her, she might accuse you of being distant. She might say you don't care. But what she doesn't see is that your stillness is proof of care, because you refuse to add fuel to the fire. You're done being a character in someone else's hallucination. You are the author now. So many men ask, how do I make her see the truth? You don't. You live it, you model it. And if she's capable of seeing it, she will. If not, she won't. But either way, you don't bend. You don't compromise your masculinity just to soothe a woman's fleeting discomfort. You let her either rise or release herself, because you're not a prop. You're not a fantasy. You're not here to make her feel something at the cost of your own clarity. You are here to be something. A standard, a presence, a man who no longer loses sleep over emotional fiction. That and a day will come when she looks back and sees it all clearly. She'll remember how you never folded, how you never begged, how you never twisted yourself into her dream, and she realized you were the only real thing she had. But by then, you'll be gone, not out of spite, but because you outgrew the illusion. You stepped out of her emotional maze, walked into daylight, and never looked back. Because when a man sees the difference between fantasy and reality, he never chooses fantasy again. Not even if it's pretty, not even if it's tempting, because peace tastes better than chaos every time. So if you're in that place right now, confused, questioning, exhausted, understand this. It's not your fault. You didn't fail her. You just woke up. You saw the pattern. You stepped out of her imaginary world, and now you build yours. A world where love is chosen, not chased, where peace is sacred, where truth is spoken, and where the only woman who gets access is the one who's done confusing herself, the one who finally chooses to see you as you are, not as her story needs you to be. That's the love you deserve. And until it finds you, keep living like the man who no longer accepts anything less.